Most people carry a mental image of the brain essentially switching off during the night, going into a kind of resting mode, doing very little, conserving itself until morning. The reality is the precise opposite. While your body lies completely still and your conscious awareness fades, your brain becomes extraordinarily active, running one of the most sophisticated biological systems that science has ever uncovered. It is cleaning itself, repairing accumulated damage, rebuilding the neural connections that allow you to remember names, follow conversations with clarity, and wake up feeling genuinely sharp. And here is the part that most people never hear about in any meaningful detail. After the age of 60, this entire system begins to weaken, slowly, quietly, without any obvious warning signs, and often for years before anyone notices the effects. What makes this particularly concerning is that by the time the symptoms become undeniable, the forgetfulness, the mental fog, the moments of confusion, the underlying damage has typically been accumulating for a very long time. And among those foods, 5 stand out with particular consistency in the research for their effects on the aging brain. But before we get into those 5 foods, you need to understand what is genuinely happening inside your brain during the night. Because once you see the mechanism clearly, the solution will not just make logical sense. It will feel impossible to overlook. The discovery that changed. How we understand cognitive decline. During deep sleep, a fluid called cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain in a rhythmic, wave-like motion, clearing out debris in much the same way that water washes accumulated sediment from a riverbed. This system is now called the glymphatic system. And what it removes each night plays a defining role in determining whether your mind remains clear and functional or slowly becomes overwhelmed by its own accumulated waste. One of the most consequential substances this system clears is a protein called beta amyloid. You may have encountered this name because of its well-established connection to Alzheimer's disease. In a healthy brain that achieves sufficient deep sleep, this protein is flushed out efficiently, night after night, keeping the brain clear and functional. But when sleep is disrupted or when the brain lacks the specific nutrients required to support this clearing process, beta amyloid begins to accumulate. Slowly at first, then more steadily over time, week after week, year after year. And here's the detail that deserves your full attention. This accumulation begins long before any symptoms become apparent, long before the first memory problem surfaces. By the time someone recognizes that something is wrong with their cognition, this process may have been unfolding silently for more than a decade. Which brings us directly to the question that matters most. What does this have to do with what you eat for dinner? The answer is both simple and profound. Everything. The glymphatic system does not run on motivation or good intentions. It depends entirely on biology. It requires specific nutrients to function at full capacity, healthy fats to maintain the structural integrity of brain cell membranes, vitamins to support nerve signaling, minerals to regulate neural activity, and compounds that manage inflammation and oxidative stress. Without these resources available in adequate quantities, the system slows, waste accumulates, and the brain you wake up with the next morning is, in some measurable way, slightly worse than the one you went to sleep with. That shift may be small, nearly imperceptible on any given day. But when you multiply it across hundreds of nights, across months and years, it becomes very significant indeed. This is how cognitive decline most commonly unfolds, not suddenly and dramatically, but through a quiet and progressive process of deprivation and misrepair that most people never connect to their daily choices. You are seeing it now, and that awareness places you in a fundamentally different position. Inside the brain, inflammation is not a vague or abstract concept. It is a real and measurable biological force that directly interferes with virtually every repair process we have discussed. Chronic low-level inflammation reduces the brain's capacity to clear waste, disrupts the architecture of deep sleep, weakens the formation of new memories, and progressively damages the energy-producing structures inside brain cells. After the age of 60, This kind of persistent, low-grade inflammation becomes extremely common, particularly in people who are not regularly consuming the nutrients required to control it. What makes inflammation especially damaging is the self-reinforcing cycle it creates. Poor sleep increases inflammation. Increased inflammation further disrupts sleep. That cycle continues, gradually accelerating the decline of cognitive function with each passing month. Every food we are about to examine plays a role in interrupting that cycle, not by targeting a single isolated issue, but by supporting the brain in a more complete and coordinate the overlooked superfood that builds and protects the brain's architecture. At first glance, sardines do not seem impressive. They are not marketed as a trendy superfood. They do not appear regularly in mainstream conversations about memory or cognitive health. But when you examine what they actually contain, it becomes immediately clear why researchers consistently identify them as one of the most valuable foods available for the aging brain. Sardines are packed with two essential omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA. These are not merely supportive nutrients. They are fundamental structural components of the brain itself. DHA, in particular, makes up a substantial portion of brain cell membranes. And those membranes are far from passive barriers. They govern how electrical signals travel between neurons, how efficiently information is processed, and how effectively different regions of the brain communicate with each other. When DHA is insufficient, these membranes progressively lose their flexibility. They become more rigid, less responsive, and less capable of supporting the rapid electrical and chemical signaling that memory and clear thinking depend on. Consider what that means in practical terms. During sleep, when the brain is actively organizing memories and reinforcing neural connections, signals must travel smoothly and rapidly between neurons. But if those signals are moving through a system that has become stiff and inefficient, the entire process is compromised. Over time, this subtle inefficiency accumulates. Memory becomes less reliable. Thinking slows. Mental clarity begins to diminish. And because the human body cannot synthesize adequate DHA on its own, the only reliable way to maintain proper levels is through dietary intake. Sardines provide this in a highly bioavailable form, one the body absorbs with exceptional efficiency, making them one of the most practical and consistent sources available. But sardines offer more than omega-3 fatty acids. They are also exceptionally rich in vitamin B12, a nutrient that becomes progressively harder to absorb as we age. This vitamin plays a critical role in maintaining the myelin sheath, the protective layer surrounding nerve fibers. Think of myelin as the insulation coating around electrical wiring. When it is intact and healthy, signals travel quickly and accurately. When it begins to deteriorate, those same signals slow, weaken, or become unreliable. This is one of the primary mechanisms connecting B12 deficiency to memory problems and cognitive decline in older adults. By providing a strong and consistent supply of this vitamin, sardines directly support the speed, clarity, and precision that sharp thinking requires. There is also a practical advantage that makes sardines more sustainable than many other fish. Because they are small and feed low on the food chain, they contain far lower concentrations of mercury compared to larger fish like tuna. This means they can be consumed more frequently without concern, 2 to 3 times per week being enough to produce a meaningful and cumulative difference, especially when combined with the other foods in this framework. But hold on, because the next food has gained significant popularity in recent years, and yet its full and specific impact on brain health is still widely misunderstood. The fruit that improves brain blood flow and balances its chemistry. Most people think of avocado primarily as a fashionable ingredient or a source of generally healthy fat. But its role in directly supporting the aging brain goes considerably further than that general characterization suggests. Avocados are rich in monounsaturated fats, the same category found in high-quality olive oil. These fats play a significant role in maintaining the structural integrity of brain cells while simultaneously supporting healthy circulation. And circulation, though it may not seem immediately connected to brain performance, is absolutely essential for it. The brain represents a small fraction of overall body weight, yet it consumes a disproportionately large share of the body's available oxygen and energy. Every moment of every day, it depends on a continuous and sufficient supply of blood to deliver the oxygen, glucose, and nutrients that keep its billions of cells functioning and repairing themselves. When blood flow is reduced even slightly below optimal levels, the brain begins operating under compromised conditions, like a sophisticated machine running without adequate fuel. Over time, this leads to fatigue, slower cognitive processing, and reduced efficiency across all repair processes. Avocado addresses this problem by supporting healthier, more flexible blood vessels and reducing the factors that restrict circulation. More oxygen and more nutrients reach brain tissue, especially during the overnight hours when repair and restoration are operating at their peak demand. But avocado's most distinctive contribution is its folate content. Folate influences a cellular process called methylation, which directly affects how the brain produces key neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. These chemicals regulate mood, mental focus, and the quality of sleep architecture. Methylation also governs which genes within brain cells are expressed, including those responsible for cellular repair and protection. And it supports the ongoing repair of DNA damage that accumulates through normal metabolic activity every day. When folate levels are sufficient, these processes operate smoothly and reliably. When folate is chronically low, the system becomes unstable. Mood shifts unpredictably. Sleep quality deteriorates. Memory gradually weakens. Including even half an avocado in your daily meals provides enough folate to meaningfully support all of these functions. When eaten in the evening, avocado also provides a sustained release of healthy fats throughout the night. Fats that help transport fat-soluble vitamins and nutrients to where the brain needs them most during its repair window. Now we come to the third food, one that many people already consume but rarely understand in terms of what it is genuinely doing at the cellular level inside their brain. The nut that powers brain cells. From the inside out, among all available nuts, walnuts occupy a unique position because of the specific combination of nutrients they provide. Nutrients that address a dimension of brain aging that rarely receives attention in popular health conversations. Walnuts are a meaningful source of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, which share some of the same structural benefits discussed with sardines. But their most distinctive contribution involves a process that is far less commonly discussed, supporting the health and function of mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside every brain cell. Every neuron in your brain relies on its mitochondria to generate the energy required for all cognitive functions. Without sufficient energy production, even fundamental processes begin to slow. Over time, damaged mitochondria accumulate within cells, reducing their overall efficiency and contributing to the oxidative stress that accelerates cognitive decline. The human body has a natural mechanism for managing this, a process that identifies and removes damaged mitochondria so they can be replaced with newer, more efficient ones. In younger individuals, this process operates reliably and effectively, but as we age, its efficiency diminishes. Damaged mitochondria begin to build up, draining energy from the cell and progressively impairing its function. Compounds found in walnuts help support this cellular cleanup process, allowing brain cells to maintain a healthier balance of energy production and reducing the accumulation of dysfunctional mitochondria that would otherwise compromise their performance. This becomes particularly important during sleep, when the brain is engaged in active repair and requires a consistent and reliable energy supply to sustain all of its restoration work. Beyond their role in cellular energy, walnuts are rich in antioxidants and polyphenolic compounds that reduce oxidative stress and inflammatory activity, both of which directly interfere with the repair processes the sleeping brain depends on. A modest handful consumed in the evening provides consistent overnight support for these interconnected systems. The fourth food connects all of these benefits and adds dimensions that none of the others can provide on their own. Magnesium is one of the most consistently undervalued nutrients in discussions about brain health, yet it has a direct and powerful effect on the quality of sleep, which, as we have established, is the very foundation of the entire brain repair system. Magnesium regulates the nervous system by calming excessive neural firing and allowing the brain to transition smoothly and reliably into the deeper stages of sleep, where the glymphatic system becomes most active and memory consolidation reaches its highest intensity. In adults who do not consume sufficient magnesium, and this deficiency is far more common after 60 than most people realize, sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, and less restorative. The brain struggles to reach and sustain the deeper phases consistently, which means that cleaning and repair processes are repeatedly interrupted before they can be completed. Over time, this leads to progressive accumulation of waste and a gradual but measurable decline in cognitive performance. Spinach helps correct this deficiency, supporting more stable, deeper, and more restorative sleep, and giving the brain the biological conditions it requires to perform its most important overnight work. Beyond magnesium, spinach contains natural dietary nitrates that the body converts to nitric oxide, a compound that relaxes and widens blood vessels, improving overall circulation and specifically enhancing oxygen and nutrient delivery to brain tissue during peak repair periods. Spinach also provides vitamin K, which supports the formation of specialized fats that maintain the myelin sheath surrounding nerve fibers, and vitamin E, a potent antioxidant that protects the structural integrity of brain cell membranes from the oxidative damage that accumulates during normal metabolic activity. Preparation matters with spinach. Cooking it briefly breaks down certain compounds that can interfere with mineral absorption, making the magnesium and other nutrients significantly more bioavailable. A generous serving of lightly cooked spinach with dinner is one of the most efficient and practical ways to support multiple dimensions of brain health simultaneously. Now we arrive at the fifth and final food. In many respects, it amplifies everything the previous four provide, taking the benefits already established and intensifying them. The anti-inflammatory powerhouse that keeps the brain flexible and resilient mackerel contains exceptionally high concentrations of both DHA and EPA. But beyond their structural role in brain cell membranes, these fatty acids function as powerful anti-inflammatory agents within neural tissue itself. This is especially significant because inflammation, as we discussed, is one of the primary forces that disrupts sleep, damages neurons, and prevents the brain from repairing itself effectively during the night. Inside the brain, specialized immune cells are responsible for protection and maintenance. But in the context of aging, and particularly in brains that lack sufficient anti-inflammatory nutrients, these cells can become overactivated, releasing compounds that damage rather than protect the surrounding tissue. This creates a self-amplifying cycle in which inflammation causes damage, that damage provokes more inflammation, and the cycle continues, accelerating the overall decline. The omega-3 fatty acids concentrated in mackerel help interrupt this cycle, restoring a more appropriate balance and reducing the unnecessary cellular stress that compromises brain cell function over time. Mackerel also supports healthy levels of a compound essential for learning, memory formation, and neural plasticity. This compound promotes the growth of new neural connections, reinforces existing ones, and supports the brain's ongoing capacity to adapt and respond to new information. In practical terms, it functions as a biological growth factor, helping the brain remain flexible and responsive rather than becoming progressively rigid and slow. Including mackerel once or twice weekly alongside sardines creates a consistent and complementary supply of these essential fatty acids. This regularity is what allows the brain to maintain its structure, manage its inflammatory environment, and sustain the processes that keep memory and clear thinking intact over time. The synergy that makes the system far more powerful than any single food. But here is where the most important insight of this entire video emerges, and it is something most people overlook entirely. These foods are not intended to function in isolation. They constitute a system, and when combined and consumed with appropriate regularity, they create an internal environment, particularly within the brain, that is far more powerful than any one of them could produce independently. Each food addresses a different layer of the same fundamental challenge. Together, they support the brain in a way that feels almost coordinated, targeting structure, circulation, cellular energy, inflammatory control, sleep quality, and oxidative protection simultaneously. Sardines and mackerel strengthen and maintain the physical architecture of brain cells while reducing inflammatory stress. Avocado improves cerebral blood flow and supports the chemical balance of key neurotransmitters. Walnuts help sustain cellular energy production by supporting healthy mitochondrial function. Spinach deepens sleep quality, enhances circulation, and actively shields brain cells from oxidative damage. When all of these elements are consistently present and working in concert, the result is a system that supports repair, preserves clarity, and builds long-term neurological resilience. The factor that determines how effectively your brain uses these nutrients. Now we come to the element that quietly determines how much of the benefit you actually receive from everything we have discussed. Timing. Not just what you eat, but when you eat it. This has a direct and measurable influence on how effectively your brain can utilize these nutrients during the overnight repair window. You can include all 5 of these foods in your regular diet and still miss a substantial portion of their potential benefit if they are consumed randomly and without any consideration for when the brain actually requires them most. Consider what happens in the hours following your evening meal. As your body moves towards sleep, significant physiological changes begin. Digestion slows, hormones shift, and the brain begins preparing to enter the deep sleep stages where the most critical repair work occurs. This is precisely when the glymphatic system becomes most active, when memory consolidation reaches its peak intensity, when the brain requires a ready and accessible supply of nutrients to perform all of this work at optimal efficiency. If the nutrients your brain depends on are already circulating in the bloodstream during this window, rather than being metabolized and stored for potential future use, the entire repair process runs more smoothly and completely. The structural fats needed to maintain cell membranes are immediately available. The vitamins required for neurotransmitter function are already present. The minerals that facilitate deep sleep are already active. The anti-inflammatory compounds are already in place. You are not asking the body to retrieve nutrients from storage at some indeterminate future point. You are delivering them precisely and deliberately when biological demand is at its highest. For an aging body in which nutrient absorption and metabolic efficiency are already reduced, this alignment between nutritional timing and biological need becomes increasingly important. Every advantage compounds. Every small optimization builds on the previous one. A dinner that includes mackerel, a generous portion of lightly cooked spinach, and half an avocado is not simply a healthy meal in a general sense. It creates a specific and targeted internal biochemical environment. Within hours of eating, the fatty acid profile of your bloodstream shifts. The availability of magnesium and folate increases measurably. Blood vessels begin to relax and circulation improves. Inflammatory signaling begins to decrease. All of these changes begin the same night, not in some distant theoretical future. They influence directly and immediately how effectively your brain performs its nightly restoration work. This is what gives the approach its real power. The effects are not distant or delayed. They are immediate at the biochemical level. And when this pattern is repeated consistently, the effects compound, one improved night building toward the next, progressively creating a stronger and more stable foundation for long-term brain health. Why real food outperforms isolated supplements? It is not that supplements are without value. In specific circumstances and for specific deficiencies, they can serve a meaningful purpose, but they cannot replicate the biological complexity of real food. When you consume something like spinach, avocado, or walnuts, you are not receiving a single isolated nutrient. You are receiving an integrated combination of vitamins, minerals, healthy fats, dietary fiber, and bioactive compounds that interact with each other in ways that enhance their collective effect. The healthy fats in avocado and sardines, for example, significantly improve your body's absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins present in spinach. The fiber in spinach influences the digestive processing of other nutrients, improving their overall bioavailability. The polyphenolic compounds in walnuts interact with gut microbiome populations in ways that generate additional compounds beneficial to brain function. These interactions are layered and mutually reinforcing. They cannot be replicated in a capsule or a powder formulation. This is precisely why focusing on whole foods, consumed in complementary combinations and with appropriate timing, produces results that feel more complete, more sustainable, and more aligned with how the brain actually functions. Let us bring everything together now, because what you have absorbed throughout this video is not simply a collection of useful facts about food and sleep. It represents a fundamental shift in how you understand your own brain and the role you play in determining its trajectory. For most people, cognitive decline feels distant and inevitable, something tied to aging that simply unfolds over time, regardless of choices made. But what you now understand is something entirely different. The brain is not passively aging, it is actively and continuously responding to the inputs it receives. And one of the most powerful of those inputs is something as ordinary and as accessible as your evening meal. Research consistently demonstrates that the brain retains a remarkable degree of adaptability well into the later decades of life. People in their 70s and 80s who make deliberate and targeted dietary changes, particularly by incorporating nutrient-dense whole foods like the 5 we have examined, frequently experience measurable improvements in memory recall, mental clarity, sleep quality, and overall cognitive energy. These improvements manifest in daily life in tangible ways. In conversations that flow more easily, in thoughts that arrive more quickly, in a sense of mental sharpness that many people had quietly concluded was no longer available to them, which returns us to the central truth of everything we have discussed. The decision about whether your brain receives those resources is made in the hours before sleep, not in a clinic, not in some future plan, at your dinner table, in choices that feel small and routine in the moment, but carry real and compounding consequences over time. For years, most people make those choices without awareness, guided by habit, convenience, or simple hunger, without recognizing the long-term implications for the organ that determines the quality of everything else. But now you see it clearly. You understand what your brain is doing during the night and why it matters. You understand how the glymphatic system depends on deep sleep and targeted nutrition. You understand how inflammation disrupts repair and how specific foods help counter it. You understand how memory consolidation depends on the chemical environment created by your nutritional choices. You understand the role each food plays: sardines and mackerel for structure and anti-inflammatory support, avocado for blood flow and chemical balance, walnuts for cellular energy, spinach for sleep depth and protection. And you understand that these foods are most powerful when consumed together, when timed to align with the brain's overnight demand for nutrients, and when repeated consistently enough to create the compounding pattern that produces lasting change. The brain is responding right now to what you give it. Every night, it attempts to do the most important work it does on your behalf. The only question that remains is whether you are choosing to give it what it genuinely needs to succeed, because now you cannot unknow this. And that leads to one final question, one that is simple on the surface, but carries genuine weight now that you understand everything behind it. What are you going to have for dinner tonight? This is Dr. Eric Berg. I will see you in the next one.